But legitimately, you would not have been shaped into who you are as a man of God without that physical pain.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Jake, completely.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to podcast number 111 of the Gordon and Cherise show. And if it sounds like there's a lot of energy in the room, there is, because today is a very monumental day for the podcast, because we have our oldest son from Australia here, Jacob Selley. We are so happy to have you in this studio. It's so exciting. And today we are going to be talking, and this will be a two-part episode, but about a son's perspective about chronic pain and possibly parent hacking tips, if we need to talk about that too.
That very, very good, Cherise. Good morning to you as well. Good morning, Jake.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to join. This is a long-time listener, first-time caller. So very thankful that I could be on here. My special guest coming up.
And so it's awesome. Significant because it's show 111. And that's the what? What does that mean to you?
Well, when you asked me this, when you said 111, I thought you were talking about two different numbers. So I thought of my wife's birthday because January 11th, but you're talking 111, so not really sure of the significance of that number. But yes, 111 is Rebecca Selley's birthday.
All right.
And who is Rebecca Selley, if people don't know?
Rebecca Selley is the reason why I am in Australia. She is my wife. Met her 11 and a half years ago, and we've been married for a little over 11 years and have lived in Australia that entire time.
Much to a lot of tears and a lot of joy about that, by the way, because
at the same time,
yeah,
it's amazing.
think
we're so proud of their family. We love them so much.
We do, and I think a lot of the paradox of life is in that story right there, because it's the best celebration of knowing that Jake's life is flourishing somewhere else, but the day-to-day connection of just physically touching, physically hugging these grandkids, seeing the family. We've had a 3-year separation because of COVID.
Yes, we have.
And we've talked about it in previous podcasts. Not only has COVID, it's affected so many things, but it's also, I think, the reality of the separation with our family. And once we connected and just saw each other, FaceTime is great. It's such a blessing, but there is nothing that replaces the quality one-on-one time together.
That's right, honey.
And our family has been years in the making, because for nearly 27 years, this family has become what it is, right? Yes. Our family.
It's beautiful.
Through you and I. And yeah, Jake, let me just start by saying this, because Jake became my son through marriage. And because I was so intimidated by this kid, I will say this. I met him at 7 years old, and he had glasses on, and he was absolutely...
A lot to be intimidated by, right?
No, he was gorgeous. He was so athletic. He was so smart. And I will never forget meeting him at Outback Steakhouse. And he had a deck of cards, and you were playing with your dad, and you were playing, what was he playing? Poker?
Poker, yeah,
Poker.
Probably.
Yeah.
And I looked at that going, I don't even know how to play that game. Like, I could play Go Fish, but poker? And he's 7? I'm in trouble.
Well, Cherise, you are TMI to the whole audience out there with chronic pain.
Well, I'm glad you don't have a gambling problem with poker. So
I think if I did, you honestly, like, the intimidation factor was real. You were so far ahead of your years from the very first day I met you.
Well, let's hear from Jake. Mm-hmm. Jake, why don't you share with the audience who you are? And you bring a significant voice for those who have dealt with chronic pain and had kids at younger ages. You have some great insight. So go ahead. You take the floor.
Where do we start, right? Well, my name, obviously, is Jacob Scott Selley the first. And why I say that is because I would say probably my two most precious gifts in life are my two children. First boy, Jacob Scott Selley Jr., and then Harmony J. Lavelle. And yeah, I think that they are the two that give me vision. They give me the motivation. They are what spur me on to want to try to create every opportunity possible. And I think about that in the perspective as a parent, and with the topic of today, and what we're speaking about is what it's like living with a parent that has chronic pain, and now being able to see it from a father's side of all the opportunity that you want to be able to give your kids, the limitations that chronic pain can potentially provide on that. So how do you try to build a strong relationship with your kids? How do you try to instill values in them when physically you'll be limited? And so I think that can be a pretty interesting dynamic at play. And it's something that fortunately I've got decent health.
You've got, yes.
You do. You have decent health, but as a child, you really had to, like I said earlier, I feel like there were parts of you that grew up very, very fast. Because there was some dynamic between you and your dad that a lot of kids don't have to endure, which is suffering. And so do you remember a life before Chris came into the family, which is your younger brother, which is my biological son, and I came into your life? Do you remember any time that you had with your dad before you were 7? And what was that like? Like just you and your dad time?
I mean, I've got some distinct memories before Dad went through the injuries, where we would be in his chiropractic office and I'd be wearing a lab coat, and I'd go help adjust patients that I could, like as good as I could as a 3-year-old, right? And I distinctly remember certain situations where I was in the second car accident with you. I was sitting in the back seat when we got rear-ended.
Correct.
And I was okay. It wasn't a very bad accident, but the fact that you were still wearing a neck brace, had just come off of neck surgery.
Right.
And,
that's right.
And so I do have memories. I have very few memories of what it was like before you experienced chronic pain to the point of afterwards. And I think most of my life I have lived with you having chronic pain.
That's right. You sure have, Jake.
And Gordon, what was it like for you at that point? From watching your son go into the chiropractic office with you to all of a sudden you're smashed.
I was on top of the world.
Yeah.
And so I had a little jacket, Dr. Jake. It was, maybe the last 1 or 2 patients of the evening that were familiar and had progressed well in their health. They always wanted to see Dr. Jake. So that was exciting. But more importantly, Jake touched on a note earlier. And the note was this, is some of the motivations he has in his own life are spurred by his children. So even in chronic pain, even when I went through the acute pain cycles and I dealt with physical injuries, I also dealt with psychological problems in the sense of you get depression,
right?
The emotional portion. You deal with a whole myriad of symptomatology when it comes to chronic pain. And part of my motivation to not give up at that time, when I couldn't hear the voice of God, when I had felt like I was falling backwards, Jake was part of my motivation. It's your children.
Of course.
And I wanted to keep going. So I looked outside of myself to see how I could still be an impact and a strong influence on him. And love was the greatest thing for me.
And let's get real. I mean, at the time that you had that accident that Jake remembers, and you were still in practice, but that is what stopped everything overnight for you.
It did.
And so at that point, after you had this I don't remember what neck surgery it was, but then you had a lifting restriction, right?
Right. I had a 0 to 5 pound lifting restriction, which they thought would be imposed for the rest of my life.
So Jake, what was that like for you? You're a little kid and your dad can't lift.
Slave labor. No. I think, as a kid, you see your parent going through pain, and as a child, you don't know how to fully comprehend it. So you think about just ensuring that you don't add to the pain or you add to the suffering. And so you naturally start to want to help out because you don't want to be a burden on your parent.
Wow.
And so I would willingly and kind of happily do it to help him. And it was almost like I would want to step in and be like, no, he can't do that. So let me jump in and help. And that was even from a very young age, and not necessarily consciously thinking about it, but that's just, I don't know, that's a mentality that gets brought up when you have a parent that goes through chronic pain.
Yeah.
So explain, as you grew up a little bit more, as you went from maybe helping dad with groceries or, carrying what you could carry when you were little to like manhood almost, well, let's say teenage years. What about lifting then? Did you become a professional? Like, what happened?
Okay.
I want to know.
Are we getting you two ganging up on
I
me
do
on
want to
this
know
one?
how your dad took advantage of all
What
that.
happens when you have a dad who's got chronic pain and slight case of OCD?
Slight. You're being very generous with your words.
There's a lot of furniture we had to move from the house to the office, back to the house every couple of weeks. And I would ask Dad, can we just plan this out, the layout that you want beforehand, and then we can make the decisions to move. But yes, unfortunately, I didn't get paid for any of that. I could have been a mover. No, it was okay.
Those are kind of the side benefits, though. You really learned, and now in your...
You know what? Now thinking about this,
Now
back then
about
I didn't realize that wasn't normal. So I thought it was just a part of life that we had to move furniture ongoing. But looking back on it, I'm like, I haven't moved the furniture in my place in 6 months even. That's
Something's
a long time.
wrong.
Yeah, something's wrong. So yeah, it's okay.
Oh, wow.
It's all right. Cherise, continue. Please, let's move from this. Let's shift, pivot.
Well, I think these are the real talks, though. I mean, Jake went from carrying a burden. Honestly, it sounds trivial, but I don't think it is. As a mom and now as a Gigi Reese to your kids, just thinking of that burden of a child saying, I don't want to be a burden. You're carrying a burden by saying you don't want to be a burden in a way. And so I think what's phenomenal as I watched you grow up over the years, I just think it's amazing because you could have completely faded into the background or allowed that to overtake you into a depression for yourself. You could have, as a child, there were decisions that you made even as a child that I don't even know that you're aware of, but that have made you the incredible man you are today, but not wanting to be a burden, wanting to help your dad, wanting to help your family. But you did take on so much. When we came into the family, when I say we, I mean Chris and me, you already knew how to do cooking. Certain cooking. You were
I
7.
still don't know how to cook too much. So.
No, but you could do your own breakfast.
Yeah.
And then I came into the picture, and our very first breakfast together after we got married was taking some pancakes and putting them...
Microwave pancakes.
Putting
them in a toaster.
Yes.
And they were like completely charcoaled.
Yeah.
And I put them on the plate for you. And you looked at your dad and you're like, do I have to eat
I thought
this?
she was trying to kill me.
So poor Jake, not only was he having to deal with not wanting to be a burden, then all of a sudden there's this like crashing of somebody else is in the family. There's another person and I can actually do things better than her. So why do I have to listen? And you're not just dealing with chronic pain. You're dealing with the fact that sometimes pain blows up families. And really that didn't contribute to a previous divorce, but we did become a blended family years after you were divorced.
We dealt with several dynamics, and we've talked about it on previous podcasts. The divorce rate among those with chronic pain is 75%. Okay. And you add in blended family. You add in all the different things of raising kids to teenage years and moving on. You add in the financial burden that you have, and you feel extremely limited with chronic pain. We went through a lot of reconstruction of identity, calling, purpose with work, the way we viewed life, and it was through the lens of God. okay? And especially at the top leadership of the family.
Yep.
And a lot of times you don't want to share that with your children. You don't want to share everything God's sharing with the adults because they're still supposed to be kids.
That's right.
They're still supposed to grow up on their own developmental stage. They're supposed to discover God in their ways. They're supposed to do things. But I have to talk about the furniture for half a second.
No, we're not going back to this. We're not going back to the furniture.
Well, but when you're in,
we are.
but when you're in chronic pain, I tell you what happens with a lot of people, and it was one of the things that really affected me in a negative way, is that your body is in so much chaos. I always thrived under an organized mindset and having an organized body. And so even the environment around you, when it's in chaos or something doesn't feel like it's right, I think it was a way to fix things. And I think a lot of people try to fix things and gain control over things that they don't have control over anymore. And yes, the kids had some extra moving.
Was that your version of an apology?
No.
Okay.
No, I think that's a constant cycle and balance that everybody deals with in life, no matter what, is this balance between chaos and order.
Absolutely.
And trying to create order. But too much order, sometimes you need to have chaos. And that's where Cherise comes in to throw the chaos into the order.
It's all right. I kind of enjoy being in that role, though. I like shaking things up for you guys.
No, but I will say there's a lot of dynamics at play with, blended family, divorce, dealing with a parent with chronic pain, all of this coming together. It does shape your identity. And I think that there's a lot of areas in life, especially when the parent has chronic pain, that you feel like you're not able to provide or you're missing out with, because the burden financially, the burden to be able to say, hey, let's go play basketball in the yard, let's go play catch, let's do something like that. It's very limited. But what we did make up for is that physical side of things is only one element. And you're talking about having a lens of faith through this. I think even a precursor to that is the mindset with it, because the mindset that you still train in being able to not be a victim to your situation, but learning how to make the best of what you've got and learning how to have discipline through this. Then that discipline carries over to your faith.
Yes.
Because without that discipline, you're not going to be consistent in it. And so I think,
totally agree.
Yeah, I think if we're looking at this, yes, there's a lot of challenges that come with chronic pain, but then as a parent there, you still have a child whose mind is literally a blank slate. And how do you help encourage them and bring them into a way of living that, you will have chaos thrown into your life. You will have suffering thrown into your life. And contrary to what society talks about, where you just want to seek comfort, that's not realistic whatsoever. So being able to, it's actually a benefit for kids in some ways to have a parent that has chronic pain, because you see the suffering firsthand. You come to expect it. You absolutely hate it in so many ways. Your flesh doesn't want it. You want to move away from it, but you see the reality of what life is. So having that reality of life very early, you're able to have a better mindset when you do face challenges out in the real world, because it's not easy.
You made a very good point there. So folks that have children that have to see them in pain, there really shouldn't be shame there, should there?
No, not at all.
Okay? And the children are going to learn a lot of lessons. Life lessons, if the focus is in the right direction to get through this mental minefield of problems that they might have.
But I could say this, Gordon, you contributed to the health of that, because you could have put all of your pain. What if you put all of it on Jake? He could not have run the race of his life.
Right.
And what if you stayed embittered towards your pain and took it out on all of us? Well, we wouldn't be here today.
Right.
None of us would be, because we would all be in our corners, maybe not even married anymore, or just divided because pain became the winner. Instead, pain is the monster to be slain. And I think that what I've found entering into the family is that this monster can be slain together, and there's much more power in being a family and being connected and being unified. And yes, it takes all of these fluffy layers of life away. Because I think even at the very beginning of establishing our family, we had deep, meaningful, and real conversations, even in your very youngest years. You were able to keep up with it because you kind of started to understand the more important meanings of life. But there's just this beautiful dynamic happening in the relationship because, Gordon, you helped in your leadership to establish that, yes, pain is horrible. It's not fun. And there's things that Dad can't do with you. But there's also things that you can impart and that you will impart. And you're not going to show them that you're going to be defeated by the pain. And that's not going to be the primary signature of this family.
Right.
And I will say, looking back on it, that was very much a journey. It wasn't just right away that you realize it and move forward with it. I remember how much of our childhood did we spend praying and hoping that you'd be healed and wishing that you'd be healed physically. And we spent a lot of time focusing on the lack and wishing for you to be normal again, quote unquote. And I remember we'd even go to like crusades and rallies and just wishing and praying and being like, oh, I hope my dad is the one that can go down on stage and get healed. And then it was time after time that it didn't happen. And so your hopes are kind of dashed. And I remember one time when I was in college, I was at what was it? It was like a prayer night. And I called my dad afterwards and I was in tears. And I was like, I just wish that you'd be healed. And I'll never forget what you said to me. You're like, I have been healed. I've been healed spiritually. And I think that's the key piece that we completely miss out. You're so focused on the physical and so focused on what you're missing. But there's so many different elements that God shapes you and molds you in, and is that healing spiritually. It's that healing mentally.
Absolutely.
And that is the true, that's the diamond in the rough with it. And you probably wouldn't have been at this place with the Lord, been at this place with discipline. Maybe you would have been at this place with discipline, but
he could have moved his own furniture.
Yeah. Maybe I wouldn't have so many scars. No. But legitimately, you would not have been shaped into who you are as a man of God without that physical pain.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Jake, completely. I would say this, there's a big difference between success and transformation. And a lot of times with success, I wanted to always groom my son to be successful. I wanted him to have the best opportunities. But success, sometimes, even though we hear the slogans, sometimes it understands the costs and the losses in order to have the victories. But with transformation, it's such a longer process for people when the pain doesn't leave. And what moved me into transformation was the fact that I forgave pain. And I think the deficit that I had with Jake was teaching him, maybe at a younger age, how to forgive pain.
Instead of trying to command it to disappear.
Right.
And we all grew from that, Jake. Thank you for bringing that up. Because I really do think that as a family, in our more immature stages of faith and just the younger years, you're right. There were so many heartfelt prayers. It broke my heart to hear you guys pray, to hear you pray, to hear Chris pray, and for those prayers to feel like they were falling on deaf ears. But at the same time...
And then how do you explain that from a theological perspective to your children when you're trying to say that God is near?
Yes.
Right.
Yet I'm praying for this and God's not answering it.
Right. But he did answer it.
But he did, but it wasn't in the way that we were expecting.
Exactly.
Right, exactly, Jake. Exactly. And the child has this childlike faith and trust, and they're expecting in a certain way. And it's almost if-then deductive reasoning. If I pray this and I ask in his name, then I'm going to receive this. And when you don't receive it, it's like, why am I being punished or left out?
But I also think that's a flaw that we're wanting to bring up so that the church itself can heal, because a lot of it was put on us, through the experience of being in church, the experience of being around other people of faith, that it was this quick, let's pray it away kind of thing. And when it doesn't get answered and life is messy, people don't know what to do with the mess. And, I find what you have done, Jake, the resilience that you've grown into through this is unbelievable, because it has made you a very genuine person. You're not in this state of being up in the fluffy clouds. You understand the significance of suffering, but also the significance of overcoming, because you have your own story in this story. You have your story of overcoming. And you're right, it didn't happen overnight. I think you had a lot of quiet years of trying to even figure out, how do you get gravity in this situation? But you got it. You've learned so much. Love has always been there.
Yes, it has.
But the choice of, how do I grow up? How do I see this? How do I stay connected to God? How do I not hate God for what my dad goes through? Like, those are really powerful questions in there. It's okay to have those questions. It's okay to be upset or angry and to go through those stages. But what brought you back, Jake, to the center?
What brought me back to the center
Of...
Boy, these are
I feel like
questions.
I felt like it was a therapy session for me. What are you guys trying to do to me here? No, legitimately, when it comes down to it, our family was very connected, and how much time do we have together, because you weren't away working?
Right.
How much time, I would see my dad spend 6 hours, 8 hours a day in the Bible, studying constantly, being disciplined with that. And then afterwards, we won't go into the Bible study conversation as of yet.
That's on the next episode.
That's on the next podcast.
Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. No, but legitimately, it was a point of connection, because where we lacked, we could also then make up for in deeper ways. And so the core that our family had in so many ways was one that many of my friends never had with their families. And I would have friends be like, I've got troubles with my dad. I've got troubles with my mom, because they're like, my dad's never around. I'm never connected with them. And legitimately, I feel like I've always felt like this, like my dad's my best friend. Maybe second best now that I've got my little boy. It's very close. Hey. And you know what? To be fair, I'm now second best, because JJ's your number one. So
it is true.
It's okay.
It's unreal.
It is unreal. I arrived here a day after our kids arrived, and I was hoping that Dad would remember to pick me up at the airport.
Yes. Well, listen, we're concluding the first podcast.
Yes,
I cannot believe the time has passed so quickly. And Jake, what we do at the end of each podcast is we give a valuable takeaway or a thought for the day. What would you like to impart to the audience today? Just one thought.
I'll come back and go to Cherise first. Thank
Cherise.
you.
Cherise, why don't you go first?
I would just say, stay connected. I like the word you used, connected, just a minute ago. I think that we, as a family, even in pain, we've made mistakes. We've had fights. We've had bad days.
Sure, we have.
Horrible days. Sometimes it's been horrible months, and maybe even a horrible year.
Really?
But,
okay.
We have stayed connected. We've stayed transparent through the process. And the connection, I think that the beauty is everybody's going through their own version of pain when somebody they love is in pain.
Yes, they are.
But when you stay connected, when you don't fall away from that relationship, it's amazing what can happen through the process of transformation.
Yes. Very good. Very good, honey. Jake, any thoughts?
Healing can come in ways that you don't expect it to.
That's a very good thought. Very nice. I would say, to finish up today and to impart on the audience, is that prayer changes you, and your words change as you don't just focus on yourself. God already knows all your needs, and you're in a process of living. And some of us are in the fiery furnace, but there is a way out. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There is major hope.
There is.
So that's it for today. How do you get a hold of Gordon and Cherise?
Okay, honey, everybody pull up the website, gordonandcherise.com, and from there you can find our app. Our new app is going to be released when, Gordon?
It is already released, Cherise. So this is very...
It's nice.
Okay, folks.
Cherise has been working hard on the app.
Okay, with the app. It's already released, and you can also go to the Apple Store. That's the best way to do it. Okay. It's G and C on the logo. So you just hit that, and you have access to everything, especially our online courses.
I've been so involved in this part of the process.
Yes, you have. But it's all exciting, and we thank all of you who keep following us, who give us suggestions, who write comments on our Better Living community. We thank you, and stay tuned because we're going to have a second part to this series with Jake Selley.
We will see you next time.
See you next week.
Talking about the Bible studies. Thank you.